place of the Noble Lady, Lady Bennett, who has put Amendment 221. As the Noble Lady Chakrabarti says, it does not, it is an option, perhaps a softer option that your lordships might find acceptable, but in fact I do support very strongly the amendment in the name of the Noble Lord Dolakia and Baroness Butler-Sloss. The only qualm I have about Amendment 220 is the fact that it is 12 and not 14, because quite honestly, we treat our children in the criminal justice system absolutely abysmally, with demonstrably disastrous results and a recidivism rate within a year of 40%, demonstrating that the courts are not working to address the issue of these children. And as we've already heard, the Children's Commissioner described the youth justice system as chaotic and dysfunctional, and the children caught up in it are disproportionately from ethnic minority communities. We are world-leading in the awful way that we treat children, and at 10 years we are the lowest in Europe, far below the UN Committee on the Rights of Children appropriate suggestion, which is a minimum of 14 years old. And that's the average across European countries, but in fact even China and Russia, where the UK rightly often has cause to point out human rights abuses, they have higher ages of criminal responsibility than we do. And we don't have far. We can go to Scotland and see exactly what's happening there. I mean, that is 12, and as I say, I would prefer it to be 14. This isn't a moral question, it is a scientific question, because children's brains do not develop as quickly as people might think, and children below the age of 14 are still developing the capacity for abstract reasoning. Their frontal cortex is still developing, therefore they are unlikely to understand the impact of their actions. And there is, I think, some political will in Westminster to take on board this evidence, to use a phrase so loved by the government, perhaps to level up our youth justice legislation. Because in 2020, the Justice Committee recommended that the Ministry of Justice review the minimum age of criminal responsibility. Unfortunately, however, the government seems to have chosen once again to renew its ideological commitment to being tough on law, tough on youth crime, even when it's children. I just think this isn't an acceptable status quo on human rights or on scientific grounds. So the fact that children are being failed by antiquated government standards is an outrage, and reform is needed. So if the government can't accept Amendment 220, which I think it absolutely should, then there is the Amendment 221 in the name of my noble friend Lady Bennett, and it might be a softer option. I hate, and she hates, putting softer options for the government, but in this case it might work. But it would ensure a legally binding commitment on the UK government to at least consider whether our abnormally low age of criminal responsibility is tenable, given international norms and expert opinion. My noble friend Lady Bennett would of course be happy to discuss a revised text for report stage, but personally I would tough it out and vote potentially for Amendment 220 and for our Amendment 220.